Hello, everyone, and we are live here. My guest of honor today needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. This is some of you know him as the king of urban fantasy, but now that I've been reading the Cinder Spires series, I think he's also the king of steampunk, maybe the GOAT of all time, right here, the greatest of all time, possibly. Some think so, and I am one of them. But thank you, Jim, for coming on the channel. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely.
But one of the questions I always like asking authors when I have them on here is, who was the very first person to kind of inspire you to start writing, and who first told you you had any kind of talent for this?
All right, they weren't the same. Those two people weren't the same person. But the first person to inspire me to start writing was Margaret Weiss of the Dragonlance Chronicles. And she and Tracy Hickman wrote the Dragonlance Chronicles. And one day she came in to give a talk at my high school. And I was in the high school library. It was my senior year. And this will tell you too much about me. I was in high school. I was skipping class because I was a cool senior, and it was the last semester. And you do stuff like that last semester, and teachers and administrators kind of give you a blind eye, especially if you've been, a good student the whole time. And, but I was skipping class because I was cool, but I went to the library to read while I was skipping class. So nice. Yeah, that was the most nerdy, cool kid thing to do that I could imagine in retrospect. But while I was there, the assistant principal walks in, and his name was Leroy Brown. He was our assistant.
Of course he was.
Bad Leroy Brown. He was in charge of discipline at the school, So he walks in and says, "Jim, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, he says, "You must be here for the writer talk." I said, "Yes, I am here for the writer talk."
Absolutely.
He says, "Great, you can help me set up some chairs." And so I did. And Margaret Weiss came in and she started talking about being a writer. And I got really excited because, I still had very little idea of what I wanted to do with my life. And, I thought that was pretty much an unattainable sort of dream. But, she was from Independence and she had become a writer. So maybe I could too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, one thing I've always kind of, wondered as, like, I know I've heard the stories of you and your college professor, and how quickly after, were you still in college when you got your deal, or how far out of college were you once you finally got picked up?
I had gotten thrown out of the professional writing program by then. Yeah, they asked me not to come back. And when I filled out the paperwork to try and come back anyway, they lost it 7 times. And
nice.
So I said, okay, well, I guess it's time to enter the private marketplace. And I got a job working IT where I would work all night. So I was the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. guy. And they mostly liked me because I knew just enough programming that I could make things work until a programmer's alarm went off at 6:30. So they all knew that if I was there that night, I was not going to wake them up at 3 a.m. with a problem that had to be solved immediately. So I enjoyed that job. But no, that was I didn't sell until I think 2 years after that. After I was out of the writing program there at OU. But I remember when they threw me out, I was furious, and I went into the office to talk to my professor because it wasn't her call; it was somebody further up the chain from her, and she was like, "Listen, I understand. I think you've gotten screwed over too, but I know you're going to be able to be a writer eventually, and I know that things have not gone well here for you. And I'm not saying you have to go out and advertise for the professional writing program at OU here, but please just don't pan us. Just don't say we're awful. I've worked really hard to try and make this program work. And after all, she was the person who taught me everything I needed to know about writing. And so I didn't. I'll tell the truth about what happened, but I don't go around being all angry at them.
Yeah. Well,
you get into a master's program anywhere at a university, you better have a minor in politics. That's
Well, and I know on several occasions, you have been you've written things, or things have motivated you which were kind of challenges, like people telling you can't do stuff. Was that the starting point for that, where you're like, oh, you're kicking me out? Well, guess what? I'm gonna make it. Was that kind of in your head?
No, that's been there longer than that. I'm just one of those kids that, you know, they could always get to do anything by telling me they didn't think I could, you know,
Yeah.
and so that was just the way it wound up. But it just happened that, yeah, I had some challenges dropped on me along the way, and I use those for, you know, I use those for energy. The universe is always throwing energy at you, and sometimes that energy doesn't look very useful. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
But almost everything, even the negative energy, sometimes you can take that in and use it to make something good. And I think that's been a secret superpower of mine, you know.
well, and that's what I tell everybody. I was like, no matter what challenges come your way, what, you know, something good, something bad, you can make good out of it. You just
Yeah.
have to kind of find it, whether that's, like you said, negative energy that can be like a force to push you forward. Like, no, I'm not going to be stuck here. I'm going to, you know, we're going to push forward and we're going to, you know, make it. And I actually interviewed, now I'm not 100% sure. I would assume he was probably influenced a little bit by you, even though he's like 10 years older than you. But I interviewed Richard Kadri, and he's, you know, anytime I say I love the Dresden Files, it's like, well, then there's the Iron Druid, and then there's Sandman Slim, you know.
Right.
And he was telling me that he didn't, you know, he didn't even start getting like, you know, royalties and stuff like that past his, you know, until he was like book 5.
Right.
You know, how quickly did you start seeing stuff come in? Like, were you a hit pretty quickly? Because I didn't come in until you were like on book like 9 or 10, I think.
Book 1 came out, and it was one of those books where I went out to do signings and nobody came. You know, like my writing teacher showed up and that was it.
You did it. You got traditionally published.
Exactly. You know, book 2 and 3, it's sort of hard to say how they did financially because I was having some issues with the person I was using as an agent at that time that had to be ironed out, and it turned out they were keeping more money than they should have.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it was sort of confusing as to how much I was actually making, and so it wasn't until I think book 4 or 5 came out that I had switched agents and started getting, you know, clean
You're like,
of what I was making money. So by then I was clearing my I was clearing my advances within the first year.
nice.
You know, by the time I got book 5 or 6, and then by the time I got to the hardbacks, then things went real well. You know, they would sell out. You know, before we'd get to the paperback, the hardbacks would be paying off already. And I've never been a writer who tries to get a whole ton of money up front.
Okay.
I mean, I want to work for a living. You know, I want to earn my bucks, and so you know, I don't press for big advances for the most part.
But yeah, I've heard Brandon
enough to kind of say, well, this is the sort of money I make, so this is really getting.
Yeah, you don't want to be undervalued.
I say that, but I don't want to go, no, you will pay me another $500,000 this time. It'll be up to you to make it profitable. You know.
Yeah.
I figure if I write a good enough story, it'll be profitable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I've listened to some of like Brandon Sanderson's you know, speeches and stuff that he does, and I mean, he's pretty open about his stuff, you know, and he's like, you know, this is what they're going to give me up front, this is what they're going to give me when I'm done, and you know, this is what I get when I sell so many or whatever. But yeah, he says that just like you, like there's a difference. Some people want big money up front, and then other people want percentages on the back end, and you know, but you being so like, you're what, 25 years in now to Dresden? Is that where we're at? 24, 25 now?
I mean, that's for everybody else. For me, it started in 96.
Yeah, I was gonna say for you, it's
30 for me. Yeah.
You're like, I've been living with this guy for 30 years.
Yeah, this guy, wow, he drives me crazy sometimes. Dude, stop punishing yourself. Quit it. You know.
Yeah, but and this is a question you are one of the more prolific authors that I've interviewed, and this is a question that I've always wanted to ask somebody kind of at your level. Are you kind of beyond the developmental editor now, or like, do you know exactly where you want to go? And I know you use beta readers to kind of curve the edges. But are you kind of beyond developmental editors now?
Oh, I wouldn't say beyond, because if you ever think that you're beyond somebody else's,
Well, yeah, you're never perfect.
But they do kind of look at me and just say, you know what, it's just not worth the energy. Just let him do what he's going to do. It seems to work out.
We don't want to fight with him over
or
it.
sometimes the editor will have something and they'll be like, this doesn't get developed. This doesn't go anywhere. What are we going to do with this? And I'm like, it's a long-term thing. Trust me. And they go, okay, well, he seems to do long-term things all right, so we'll trust him.
Yeah,
so that's worked out all right. And plus, I've developed a good professional friendship with Ann Sowards, who's my editor. I've been working with her for 20 years now, and it's things just go well. We know each other. She knows what she can ask me, and the things that I'm going to twitch about, and the things I'm going to be happy with.
I can see it.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing when I first started reading the Dresden Files. My friend, he was like, Joe, you got to pay attention when you get to book 3. You have to pay attention. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm paying attention. And there are and this is one thing I will say that you're the best at, is where you throw arcs up like no other author. Like, and they come down on times you're not even expecting, like 6 books later. Then it's like, what? That happened in book 3, and now the consequences are here.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I'm thinking about like developmental editors. I'm like, you have so many arcs going up. If somebody says, well, you need to push this out of the way, and you're like, no, something's about to drop on this. Trust me. Like you said, trust me.
Yeah. Oh no, that stuff they don't really work with me on too much. They're just like, oh wow, that was cool, and there's going to be more of this. Okay, carry on. That's just the way the editors go. But yeah, I learned a lot of my writing watching Babylon 5.
Yes.
I watch Babylon 5, but Babylon 5 is a show for writers. It really is in a lot of ways.
I've heard multiple people say that. Yeah.
And there's stuff that they drop in season 1 that doesn't come out until season 5. And who does that? Nobody does that. Looking at that and looking at how satisfying, how deeply emotionally satisfying to me it was to see these plots play out over 5 years on this show. And it helped because I had a group of friends who also wanted to be writers, and we all got together to watch the show every week, when new episodes came out. And Straczynski really is a brilliant craftsman. He knows exactly what he's doing. He had a great time, and he obviously had a great time writing. And I think it was also one of the most difficult things he's ever done, because he did all the writing for most of season 2 and 3 himself. In addition to being the showrunner, which is an ungodly amount of work. I mean, an 18 hours a day kind of job, But yeah, I was. I still go back and watch Babylon 5 every once in a while and sort of track new things. I'll think of something that's like,
that could work.
How did he do this character? How did he do this arc? How did this plot get introduced? And I'll go back and look at the little things that he did to make it happen. And it's nothing super mysterious. It's just solid crafting. It's he sets things up and pays them off. And when you do that, you can build up a lot of trust with the readers, and you can do things that way.
Yeah, and I definitely think they had confidence in their material, because you're not, if you're, and it's that, like, I don't even know, like today that's more acceptable. Back then that was revolutionary, was doing instead of doing episodic things, it's like they're doing a whole season arcs or multiple season arcs. That was revolutionary back then. But even today, I'm not sure that television producers would accept, hey, 4 seasons from now, this is going to drop, unless you have to be super confident in yourself in the writing to do that. I think
you've got to be a little bit arrogant.
Well, that's a good word. That could also be a good word. You
got to be the kind of person that when people tell you can't do that, you go, oh yeah, and that helps.
Watch Hold My Beer. I think I want to say you are the king of hold my beer moments when it comes to writing and authors. It's like, you can't do that. I think I remember hearing you say when people are like, oh, killing off characters, you better not do that. And you're like, that's a thing? Hold my beer.
Yeah. I've done that a little. I think
just a little bit.
I still have to kind of keep an eye out at conventions. There's always somebody that comes up to me with this mad look on their face. I can't believe you did that.
How dare you rip my heart out, Jim?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, sorry, you paid me to. You know?
Yeah. You paid me to make you upset,
Yeah.
just so you know.
You know, it kind of worked out.
You can't be that mad at me, right?
Yeah.
So, and here's a question I really wanted to ask you, because, you know, when it comes to being a author or writer, you're still really young, you know, even though you've been in the game for 25 years, you know, we still have people like George Martin. Now, maybe he's not writing what we want him to write, but he's still writing.
Yeah.
You know, and you got some Sapkowski's getting ready to write something else, and King, and they're all 20 plus years older than you. How do you feel? Like, you know, I don't want to, like, you know, toot your horn here, but like, you're like up there. A lot of people would put you maybe on the Mount Rushmore of fantasy writers already. I mean, does that make you, like, how does that make you feel that you've influenced so many people, and there are other famous writers who like say that you're the reason, you know, that they're there?
Weird. That's not me that did. Okay. For a long time, people would come up to me once in a while, and they'll come up and say, "Hey, I read your books in Afghanistan, and they kept me sane." Or my father was dying, and I had to sit with him the whole time, and I sat and read him your books while we were.
Oh man.
Or you know, I get these different things, or you know, these books saved my life. I was in such a dark place, and I was going to kill myself, and then I decided not to. And that always feels weird when I hear that, because really all I wanted to do was to make sure I could buy enough chicken tendies for my kid, and you know, that, you know, that's what I was doing. You know, I was just trying to make a living, and I kept telling those people, hey, that, you know, I'm really glad that helped you, but that wasn't, you know, I didn't really set out to do that, so I feel kind of weird with you thanking me for it. And I didn't know what to do about it. But then there are all these other people, you know, in my past who set me up, who encouraged me, who helped me, you know, walk forward when I might not have been able to on my own otherwise. And I'm grateful to them. So, you know, I had to think about how to resolve that. And I thought about it, and I thought about it for about 10 years. And the conclusion that I came to was that while I was not trying to help all those people, you know, what I was doing was I was creating my idea of beauty and sharing it with people. You know, I was doing my art, and that might not be a huge, big, overwhelming thing. It's, you know, it's my mustard seed of positivity I was contributing to the universe, and you know, and I was just planting those seeds, and you know, I didn't make the sunshine, I didn't make the rain fall, but you know, I did put the seed in, you know, and eventually that seed grew into a tree where other people can take shelter. And
that's awesome.
And so now what I tell people when they come up and say something like that to me is I say, hey man, I was just kind of doing my job and doing, you know, doing my thing. It was a positive thing, and I'm really glad it helped you. But if you want to pay me back, then what you need to do is plant seeds of your own, because you can go out and do these small kindnesses that are not, you know, that are not a big deal, or not really an overwhelming mountain moving force. But over time, you know, if you plant enough seeds, some of them are going to grow, and some of them are going to grow into a tree where somebody can take shelter when they need it. And, you know, so if you're one of the folks out there who credits me in my writing, okay, fantastic, but you don't owe me anything. You know, we've already done business. You've bought my book. But if you feel like, you know, there's something you want to do to pay me back, plant seeds of your own. Go out and help people. You know, that's more than enough.
That's amazing. That's one of the most inspirational things I've ever heard, actually. You know, that's, you know, because yeah, there's so many people, like I told you, you know, kind of off air, you know, I'm an author, and you are like my main inspiration, but like there are so many like especially urban fantasy authors who I review books on here too, and so many of them you can tell that they are influenced by the Dresden Files. You're like, oh, that's a Harry moment, or you'll look over and you'll be like, oh, okay, there's Mouse is in this book, that's, you know, for sure, you know.
Oh, I don't know, I suspect we all liked Buffy, you know? I mean, at the end of the day, I really suspect that's kind of sort of the genesis of the whole urban fantasy thing. It wasn't the first urban fantasy, but it was the first big one that made everybody go, oh, there's a market here, you know.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think the Dresden Files, and I would wonder if, because it was pretty close, but I think you might have come a couple of years before Supernatural, because a lot of people will put the overlap on like Dresden Files might have influenced Supernatural, or there was a little bit
There
of
was
both.
probably interplay. I
Yeah.
natural. So I mean, it's seasons 4 and 5 of that show. Some of the best TV around.
Me and my friend through season 5, if they would have ended it right there, I mean, still good, but if they would have ended at 5, one of the top 5 shows ever. I mean,
but they planned it for right there. And then, well, I don't know. I mean, it went on for another 10 years after.
13 seasons.
They might do some more yet, So it's like, okay, man, people are having fun with it. Though, I mean, the whole dynamic between the brothers, was what sold that show. For everyone, because it would be, supernatural stuff, some violence, some special effects, bromance. Supernatural stuff, bromance. It was that back and forth that really made that show, the contrast.
Yeah. Well, and another question I have is, so now that you are solidly through or into 3 different series, 3 different types of genres, I guess you would say, is what is the big difference between the 3 genres that you've written, and which one do you find to be the hardest to write?
Technically, I think probably the more fantastic something is, the harder it is to write, because you have to build so many more sets. You have to spend so many more words building sets and building settings. The Dresden Files, I could say I can write, Harry, I went into a Burger King, and everybody's got kind of a vague idea. This is what a Burger King looks like, or at least they know what a fast food burger joint. I went into a Walmart, whatever. But when you're writing in a fantasy series where technology has been replaced with magic, and you're having your characters go to a restaurant, then you have to stop and think, well, what's this restaurant going to look like? What does a high class restaurant look like in a 2,000 years of development and decadence of Roman society? What does a restaurant wind up looking like in that situation? And it's so much more work to write it. It's so much more work to do to describe, because when you're doing so much description, that means you're kind of slowing your pace down. So you got to use other means to keep the pace up and to keep people interested. And it's much more of a challenge, I think, than writing anything that's like in the modern world, where you can be very spare and leave a lot of things between the lines for the reader to figure out.
Yeah.
And you can't do that as much when you're creating a world from whole cloth. You got to do a lot more work that way. Honestly, I mean, if I was half the mercenary I pretended to be, I'd be writing romance, because that's where the money is,
that's where all the that is where all the money is.
I'd be Jamie Boucher or something like that, and I'd be writing romance.
Yeah, but I know that because my wife spends all our money on romance books. So
well, there you go. Yeah, and that would be fun to write. But if it doesn't have a monster or a dragon or a wizard in it somewhere, what am I even doing?
Yeah, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's kind of my take on things. It's like, I know I could make so much more money if I would just write mainstream stuff, and it's like, yeah, but why? I know I need a giant spider to appear here.
Yes, well, and that now that's my wife, by the way, my producer. But along those lines, I mean, I was going to ask you when you're going to take over sci-fi, but you're creeping there with the Cinder Spires series. It's kind of steampunky. So my thought is, like, for me as a writer, I don't think I can really go into hardcore sci-fi. I just don't have that brain. Is that something? I know one interview maybe a long time ago you talked about maybe wanting to go into that.
Oh, I've got about half of the science fiction novel written. It's been written for a long time.
Wow.
I got done with the Alera books. Excuse me, I got allergies today. But when I got done with the Alera books, I tested 4 other stories on my beta readers to see which one I wanted to do as my next project. And one of them was this Black Company fantasy novel kind of thing. Another one was more of a kind of a standard epic fantasy. Another one was the science fiction book, and then the last one was the steampunk novel. The steampunk novel got all the emotional reaction from the beta reader, so I wound up going with that because there was a talking cat. Which,
I mean, come on now, Raul.
I should have known better. I should have known better, But the science fiction novel is essentially, I set it up to where Earth, it's a couple hundred years in the future. We've got all these settlements on the moon, at the Lagrange points, on Io, on Mars. All the people who lived off world got together and decided, you know what, these people on planet Earth, they do not understand our problems. They do not respect the things that we need to survive. We're gonna secede and exist on our own. And they call themselves the United System. And they took a power collection satellite and wrote "Don't tread on me" in giant 30-foot letters across the desert. And that's how it's going to work out. And Earth kind of went, yeah, okay, because they didn't want anybody dropping asteroids on them. So they thought, okay, we'll settle this another way.
Yeah.
And so they called themselves the United System. And I wrote all of that history just so I could have my Men in Black / X-Men cops who are the ones who deal with the aliens, called the U.S. Marshals. They're the United Marshals. They're the only ones who know about the aliens and who can deal with them, and they have the secret advanced tech that lets them handle alien problems. Because, as it turns out, the Earth is on the receiving end of the Prime Directive from the galactic community at large. And when contact is outlawed, only outlaws make contact. So when the aliens show up, it's always somebody it's some crazy scientist who needs to do experiments that aren't allowed in the rest of the galaxy, or it's like the equivalent of wild kids going cow tipping, only in this case it's cow eviscerating.
Cow eviscerating.
Yeah, or
I like it.
Or they're religious fanatics or political refugees, or they're just crazy. And those are the only aliens that show up. And so when there's a really, really dangerous one, they call it a Grendel, and there's been 11 Grendels. Time, and then Grendel 12 or 12 Grendels, and Grendel 13 shows up, and that's where the series starts. So
what has kept you from putting this out?
Really, a life, and it's not it's halfway done. I go back and reread it once in a while, and half of me is going, oh, I've got to fix this, oh, I've got to fix that, and the other half of me is going, oh, this kid isn't bad, because this is something that I wrote 15 years ago. But I wound up, I ended that series, or I didn't end the story, but I stopped working on it to work on something else, with my character having ejected from his ship in a decaying orbit over the moon, with the fusion plant about to go up and a solar flare coming on, and he's just been there for 15 years.
He's just been stuck in the worst.
He's been kind of floating there, looking at his watch every once in a while, going, "Are we going to finish this scene?" So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to go back to in the future, and that's basically the moon and humans are doing genetic manipulation on humans, and there's also some aliens hiding among us because we need them to develop the tech so that we can join the galactic community eventually. But the rest of the galactics are all looking at us like, nah, you guys are dangerous. We don't want anything. I mean, there's a reason we haven't had alien contact. There's got to be a good reason for it. And one of them is, wow, those humans. I mean, good Lord, if they get off the planet, I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, I guess this, you're getting me excited over here. And so that kind of is leading into another question I wanted to ask you. It's okay. So we had Brandon Sanderson having this huge Kickstarter, right?
Right.
And I watch his stuff from time to time. And one of the things he said, like, somebody asked him, like, who else could have six-figure success or more close to you? And the first person he always comes up with is Jim Butcher. Is that because he does like a hybrid thing, right? He's got traditional stuff and he kind of does his own thing a little bit. Is that something that you'd be interested to make some of these other projects?
Oh yeah, I'm expanding into it a little bit at a time now. I think the future is going to be hybrid writers, where they're going to be writers that are working with publishers that are also working on their own. And there's going to be, people are talking a lot about the publishing industry coming to an end, and to which I can only say, no, the publishing industry isn't going to come to an end, even with the big publishers. They're going to adapt. They're going to change. I think they're going to get leaner and meaner, like a lot leaner and meaner. But I mean, to be fair, the general model for the publishing industry is a 19th century model. It's one of the longest standing ones around. And eventually, it's not going to work anymore, and so new things are going to have to be added, and we're going to have to figure out how to do that. But at the same time, I mean, this is a great time to be a writer. You can make it as completely as an independent on your own if you want to. You can go the traditional path. You can look somewhere in the middle. There's advantages to be had everywhere. And I think the folks who are most alert and most watching. I mean, look at what Sanderson's done. You know,
Yeah.
Sanderson got himself an evil underground lair now.
Yeah, he's got a bunker.
I got to respect that. On the other hand, he's one of those guys with such a work ethic. Oh my gosh. You know, I mean, it's like I go to a convention, I go through the bookstore at the airport. Oh, Sanderson's got a new book out. I'll buy that. I'll start reading it on the plane. I land it wherever I am. I go through the bookstore again. There's another book out by Sanderson. Like, come on, man, you're making the
That's been the joke. He just keeps dropping books.
Exactly. Boom, boom, boom. It's like, oh my God, that man. But you know, he's, you know, to do what he's doing, he's kind of founding his own publishing empire. You know, and you know, hiring all these people and building this big corporation and everything, and that's awesome. I don't want to do that. You know, I mean, I don't mind doing my writing, you know, and so on, but I want to go out on the week and LARP and beat people up with plumbing supplies. You know,
See, this, I think we're on the same wavelength, because I'm just leading into another question is how, you know, we talk about Brandon Sanderson and his crazy writing, you know, pace and stuff.
Oh yeah.
How does your writing process go? Are you a person who writes pretty much like a Stephen King, where you write 6 pages every day and then you go off and do your thing? Or are you like hardcore, you write a ton and then you don't write for a while? Like, how is your writing process? Do you write until you're done with a book and then stop for a little bit? Or
at my best, what I do is I have 3 periods a day. One in the morning right after I get up, one after lunch, and then before I go to bed, for the most part, where I just sit down and start working. And my goal is to get 250 words done, to get 1 page written. And and if you know, things come up that interrupt me, it's like, okay, well, I'm only going to have 2 sessions today, you know, maybe, or even only 1 session today, maybe. And I don't worry about it too much if I don't get a whole bunch done. You know, as long as I get my 250 words done, okay, fine. What I find happens is that at some point during one of those 3 things, and I'm not trying to, you know, and mainly I just want to not punish myself for not accomplishing everything right now, because that's really the worst thing you can do to yourself as a writer, is to be all down on yourself for not getting things done. So what I find is that at least one of those sessions, things will explode. You know, I'll have a kind of a creative breakthrough. I'll get into the right flow space, or whatever it is people call it these days. But I'll get my mind right, and I'll find myself at the end of the chapter and go, oh, okay, well, I just got 2,500 words done. Fantastic. You know, like that.
yeah.
At my best, I've written 6,000 words an hour.
In an hour?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah. Well, that was special. That was Christmas Eve.
That was a special day.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was Christmas Eve, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to write the Dresden Files. You know, the Dresden Files version of Dickens, and so I sat down and wrote that. And because I had the structure and I knew what I was doing, you know, it sort of wrote itself from beginning to end, you know, in my head. So all I had to do was get it out on the page. The biggest challenge for me is that the way I do my writing is I won't start working on a chapter until I can stop and picture it in my head what's going to happen. I like comparing it to samurai style painting, you know, where the samurai settles down with his brush and he dips it in there and he stares and he stares and he stares and he stares at the paper, and then he goes, horse. You know, that's kind of what happens. And I sort of write the same way, where I'll be staring at the page until I can see where the chapter is going, and then all I have to do is copy what's in my head onto the page, which makes for very clean scripts for the most part. You know, I don't usually have a lot of editing that I have to get done during the scripts. I usually, you know, think because of the way I write, that falls together fairly well, because I'm putting the effort in up front instead of cleaning it up with multiple drafts afterwards. On the other hand, sometimes when I get stuck, it's a week before I can get to the next chapter, or a week and a half, and you know, that takes time to get through. But that's the way, you know. But that's my basics. You know, my basic plan is just have, you know, I'm in a production period. Okay, great. I'm going to sit down in the morning, sit down in the afternoon, sit down at night, and try and get something done. You know, try and get something done at each of those. And I don't have to, you know, finish a big thing. But if I do, great, and I can have the rest of the day off and go play League of Legends.
That, you know, that's actually, you know, that kind of works better for me. Like, I always write better when I'm doing something. Like, if I'm already doing multiple things, my brain is firing, thinking about doing the dishes or the laundry, and then it's like, oh, idea, and then it's like, get the phone out or whatever.
For me, it's driving. I get my good ideas when I'm driving and not really paying attention to anything. You know, just kind of my brain is idling.
Yeah, that's very very similar. And I had some people, like, everybody's like asking me questions and stuff, and one of the questions is, how, after what, almost 20 books, if you include all the short stories and everything, how what's your process to keep everything together? And because, like, for me, I'm like 5 books into writing my own, like, little series, and now I'm having to, like, go back through the manuscript to make sure everybody looks the same. And, like, have you just been doing it so long you just know it, or do you have, like, a list of, like, oh, I need to go look at this to make sure this is right?
Yeah, I do have to go back and check things. One of the things I'm always have to check is, wait a minute, who are the Carpenter kids again? How many of them?
How many do they have?
I got to go check and see how old are they now.
Oh, yeah, that would be a big thing.
They grow up so fast. You know, I mean, I find myself saying things like that. But yeah, and then I've got some beta readers who are extremely detail oriented. I've been very fortunate that way, and so they will, they're the ones that are always like, okay, in this book on page this, paragraph so and so, you said this, and then here you said this, and those don't quite oppose each other. But then if you add this in the thing that you just wrote, none of it makes sense. And I'll be like, God damn it, they're right. I have to go fix that now. And so, fortunately, I have a couple of extreme nerds who lend me their gifts.
That's awesome, man. That's what, and I've always said that too, because some people will be like, well, I can't believe, whether it's a TV show writer or a novelist, will be like, I can't believe that they, when you ask them questions at a con, just whoever it might be, they might be like, I don't remember that one. And they're like, I'm like, fans are always no more than the person themselves, because they're always rewatching or rereading constantly, while the writers move on. They're trying to do something,
It's an Ender's Game thing, right? I'm doing it for a living. They're doing it for fun. So they're doing it. I mean, I'm just trying to pay my mortgage. And here these folks are, here these. I mean, it's their good time. So for them, it's how they get away from having to pay their mortgage.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. So what has and now, no, we don't have to do any spoilers or anything, but, like, how has it been? I haven't looked today at what the bar is at on your website, but 12 months. How has it been? Instead of writing the worst 2 weeks of Harry's life, what is it like writing a year?
It's hard, man, because it's a tough year. Well, I mean, it's I mean, a lot of bad things happened, and then I got the privilege of living through a year or 2, year or 3 like that myself, and you have to, and how do you these life will occasionally come along and just hit you in the frickin' mouth and knock you down.
100%.
How do you get up after that? How do you pick yourself up when you take a bad hit? I mean, one of those hits that's bad enough that you consider checking out. That kind of bad hit, and how do you recover? How do you put yourself back together? How do you get back on your feet? Because that's the one thing that your protagonist characters always have to do, is they have to get knocked down and get back up. It's the one requirement from absolutely all of them. And yet, living through that is so hard, and it's so difficult. And I'm writing this, and I'm writing Dresden here, and I'm realizing, this is, a lot of this is just me from a few years ago. And so, it's all these emotions are coming up. It's digging up all these things for me. And it's a really difficult book to write, but it's really important to get Harry through this, because you can't just go through all the bullshit he's had to deal with, and just be fine. That doesn't happen to people. Humans are quite different than that. I mean, the damage that you take from those sorts of things adds up over time. And either you learn how to handle it and deal with it and resolve it and put it away, or it just starts hurting you more and more, and it starts coming out in ways that you aren't looking for and don't expect. And when you've got as much power as Dresden has, that's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at how maniacal evil wizards get to be maniacal evil wizards.
Well, Yeah, what's the Joker say? One bad day can turn. Well, look what happened to Harry. I mean, it's over and over again.
Yeah, he had a pretty bad day there, and but anyway, so and so I'm finding out more about the character, and he's sort of trying to put his life back together and his friendships back together. There's been all this stuff where he's got involved with all these dark powers, and they're just trying to draw him in further and further. And so he's trying to deal with that and figure out how to be a reasonable human being and try and fix himself and survive. But usually, I mean, Harry is doing there's lots of car chases and kicking down the door and buildings on fire and stuff like that. And when you're doing things over the course of a year, it's much more about, okay, well, this person that you made mad is really mad now.
Yeah, they've had time to stew.
Yeah, and you are going to have to you are having to deal with the queen of the queen of the White Court at this point on a regular basis. You are going to have to go consult your lawyers about the terms for this date because it's been set up. That sort of thing. So it's been a really interesting experience, but a difficult one for me because it's stirring up a lot of stuff. But also kind of showing me how far I've come since then, which is great because, once you do get back on your feet, you can look back at yourself and you kind of see who you were, at the really low point. And you go, oh, buddy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you went through that. I wish I'd been there to help you out. And then you realize, oh, wait, I was. So that's kind of, but I'm sort of writing. There's a lot of psychological elements going into this book that haven't been there before, and Dresden sort of having time to do a lot of thinking and to realize some things about himself. It's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go to Fireball for the first solution to the problem.
It's always there, but maybe you could hold off on it.
Maybe I should memorize a haste spell, or perhaps one of the other third level good ones, in addition to Fireball. Maybe I should have some other ones. I mean, Dresden was originally written up on one of those old D&D character sheets, the one that has the little shield where your armor class goes. And he's a wizard with a 16 intelligence and an 18 constitution. So that was how he got rolled up. So I knew he was going to get beat up a lot.
Well, and that's the big thing I always say.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a couple different things going on, but like my main character, people are like, well, what's the theme? Because that's been a thing over the last 3 or 4 years. It's like on BookTube, it's like the themes, and I'm like, well, my theme is there's always hope, basically, never give up, and that's kind of Harry Dresden's like, there's always hope, and that seems to be the main emphasis running through the Dresden Files. It's like never give up. Good can prevail if people don't give up, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how you're wanting it to be, but that's.
Oh no, I didn't think a thing about themes. I don't like building themes. I don't like working with themes. I like writing people.
I love that. I love that answer.
Yeah, I mean the theme will get built into it unconsciously while you're working anyway. Just do your work. Write the characters. Yeah. Write stuff that's cool. Write stuff that you want to read yourself. I like it for myself, and I wanted more. The closest thing to it, I think, was there was Anita Blake, which I enjoyed the hell out of, the early Anita Blake series by Laurel Hamilton, and then there was the Amber series, with Corwin, and then later with Corwin's son Merlin, by Roger Zelazny, and those were close, but they weren't exactly what I wanted, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I was like, oh, I'll just have to do it myself. And so I started writing, and I started with Swords and Horses fantasy and sort of stumbled into urban fantasy.
Yeah, I remember hearing you talk about how you wanted to be that classic fantasy style, sword and sorcerer writer.
Yeah. And when I'm a grown-up writer, I feel like I'll be able to write a good epic fantasy. And epic fantasies are awesome because traditional fantasies, oh my gosh, those things have legs. Readers will buy them, and they'll buy new copies of them when they wear out the old ones, and they will grab their friends and shake them until they read them. and you know, the fantasy readers, you know, they are a long-term bunch.
Yeah.
So if you can get fantasy books that are on the shelf, you can keep them there a very long time.
Yeah, and one thing I think of all the authors that I've read, I think you and Sapkowski do side characters better than anybody. Like you're like you know, your side characters are like they're better than most people's main characters. And like, so how do you do it? And was it a conscious thing where you're like, these side characters have to be really well thought out? And
no, I mean, I just did what my teacher told me to do. You know, I mean, she's like, here's how you build characters, and they would, you know, there would be a list of characteristics. She handed out little worksheets. You know, when you're designing a character, here's how they go. And she said, all right, now if it's a protagonist, you're gonna, you know, in every one of these, under every one of these lines, you're gonna write half a dozen things. You know, if it's a major supporting character, you're gonna write 4 things. You know, if it's a little side character, you're gonna write 2 or 3 things. And if it's just a character that's just going by to help out, just 1 or 2 things. You know, under each of these, you know, these are the words I'm going to associate with the character. Here's the props or actions that are going to be sort of associated specifically with them. And so, you know, and it could be anything from characters as complicated as Murphy, who has several different things, you know, several different traits, several different tags, several different goals, several different ways she wants to be. You know, so you wind up with half a dozen terms under each of those. Or it's somebody like, you know, there's an EMT named Lamar, and Lamar's whole point in the Dresden Files is that he doesn't want anything to do with any of the supernatural. And Harry thinks he's the smartest guy he knows. You know?
Yeah.
You know, because Lamar just shows up as just like, oh, I don't want anything to do with this. Here, let me patch you up and get out of the way because, you know, something bad's going to happen around you, Dresden. You know, and all of that is, and he's just like this tiny character, but, you know, and I only need to fill out 1 or 2 things, but it's just a matter of, you know, how much time do you spend on them? You know, how much focus do you want to give them? Between books, you got to stop and think to yourself, okay, what has their character been doing? You know, how have they grown and changed when they've been off stage? Because the one thing that you have to avoid, you have to stay away from this, and you see it a lot in movies and television shows lately, is this concept of characters who go off screen and don't seem to have been doing anything while they were there. You want to the one thing that you do. This comment I disagree with. I feel it's very formulaic.
Well,
yeah, I mean that's my thing. That's my feeling. But anyway,
you're like, I have a formula.
Yeah,
you might not see it.
I mean, I use it. I mean, it might not be something that stands out to the reader, but it's well, that's the way it goes, though, right? It all depends on your execution. If you execute things properly, I mean, if you execute properly, you do. If you execute improperly, people go, "Oh, it's formulaic, it's predictable, it's terrible." If you execute properly, they go, "Ooh, it's archetypal." And it's just a matter of doing your craft and doing and you know, you set things up, you pay them off. You set things up, you pay them off. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, one thing.
But it's simple.
Yeah, one thing I always tell people who are interested in the Dresden Files, I'm like, it starts off as a noir urban fantasy, and after about book 5 or 6, you're stuck in it, and then all of a sudden you look around and it's like being in the forest for the trees. You're like, now I came into this as an urban fantasy. Now it's an epic urban fantasy. Like the world is so big, and you know there's so much to it. I mean, Dresden is definitely epic now. I mean, there's no getting around it. There's so much to the world, so huge.
Well, thank you.
you're like
it was a lot of work.
It's like, yeah, it only took me, you know, how many books to make it. Yeah. I mean, is that something that you thought coming in? You're like, yeah, I got you guys. You guys think it's this, and then it's gonna be this. Was that always in your mind?
It was, but so was the idea of I wanted to have a starting point and an ending point, and I knew what they were. And I wanted to get from the starting point to the ending point by building things, you know, a bit at a time. and showing, these are the parts I'm working with. These are the characters we're working with. These are the the political powers that we're working with that are in this book. And so I introduced them slowly, just a little bit at a time as we go along. Plans or considerations for any Dresden Files spin-offs? Yes, absolutely. I already have an idea in mind for after I'm done with the Dresden Files, which I will be in the next 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
But after that, I'm going to do a spin-off series called Monster LLC, starring Goodman Gray.
Yes, that's what everyone's waiting for.
Yeah, and Goodman Gray, that's the name of his company, is Monster LLC, and he's sort of a fixer, a problem solver, if you will.
Yeah.
There are times when you need a hero to solve your problems. There are other problems that only a monster can fix.
Yes.
That's what he's there for. And so, and I'm going to be writing a character who's a little bit darker, and that it's going to be, he's going to be the kind of person who, when the kid who's abusive, drunken father shows up and asks him for his help, Goodman Gray isn't the kind that says, okay, well, let's get the kid out of there into somewhere safe and into a nice home. He's the kind of guy that turns into the monster under the bed and eats him. That's kind of more how he does his problem solving, and he's not going to have any of these. He's not going to have nearly as many qualms of conscience as Dresden does, when it comes to the bad guys. But at the same time, he's not a very nice person himself. But he's made a deal in order to keep his soul and to keep his free will and to be who he wants to be. And the deal is he's got to help somebody at least once a year.
Oh, nice. Okay, that makes sense now with the dollar, or
Yeah, and that's
we all knew there was something funny going on. We're like, really? Like, that makes perfect sense.
He has to pay that dollar off to his sponsor once a year, and but it has to be a dollar that he earned doing something that's nominally good.
Okay. Yeah, because I heard you mention that a while ago, and that hasn't kind of been brought up lately.
Right.
And I'm just go ahead.
Yeah, he's a little embarrassed by it. He doesn't like he goes around telling everybody what his life is all about. He's certainly not going to tell Dresden, because Dresden's such a wise ass. He'll make a thing out of it. Nobody wants that. But then I'll be able to have Dresden as kind of a frenemy character. Kind of in the background. Sometimes he's a sponsor, sometimes he'll be an enemy, sometimes he'll be a client. I'll be able to do. I mean, assuming he survives the series, I think he will, but I'm not certain. Nominally good in whose eyes? Gray's, the sponsors, or the universe's? Good question. That'll be something we'll be exploring.
Well, and this kind of goes along with you being so good at making side characters. Like, I have read book series. Now, I'm not going to say what book series they are, but I have read book series that are I'm more than 3,000 words in, or 3,000 pages in, and I'm not really connected to hardly any of the characters. But there's a book, and I assume most people are through the Dresden Files, but I still won't. You have a character that was only in a book for like a couple hundred pages, and it nearly ripped my heart out at the end of the Night of the Cross. We'll just say that. And that character hit so hard in just one book, in just a few hundred pages. And I'm just like, how do you do that, Jim? So few pages, so much impact, versus some of these gigantic stories where I'm like, I could care less if anybody dies in this book. Like, how do you manage that? Or, how does that make you feel that you can impact people with such a few amount of pages?
I got to be very careful with this power.
This is an evil power.
I have the ability to make people, cry very quickly. Great. But I mean, the way you do it, I mean, it's not rocket science, it's craft, and you sit down and you think of those moments. You got to go to your own life and think of those moments of when did this person who I deeply love and care about, when was my friend so and so, what was the thing that they did that made me go, yeah, they're one of my peeps, like that, and you have to kind of go through your life and look at lots of different things that are like that, And then you start seeing, oh, these humans that are special and important to me, they all kind of related to me in the same way. And then it's like, how can I share that with the people who are reading my book? How strongly this person affected me. How do I get that from my head and my heart over to you? And the way you do that is it's the story craft. It's a combination of the story craft and some empathy and some instinct, but nothing that most writers aren't perfectly able to handle, I think. But you pay attention to the craft real hard, and it makes everything else easier. It feels so artificial as a writer, while you're doing it, because you're sitting there going, well, I need them to, maybe this word is not the right word to associate with this character, because I need the reader to feel more trust, more assurance, when they meet this character, that he's somebody who knows what's going on, and then you show that person and you show them being kind and supportive, and you follow the rule of 3 always. If you're gonna have a character do that, you have them do it 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason that works is because in the world, when we were living rough with the animals, if you heard one sound, that was just a sound. You heard one animal call. Okay. If you heard 2, that might be something to pay attention to, because it might be a coincidence that you heard an owl over here and an owl over here. But if you hear 3 of them, then you can go,
something's going on.
That's something different. That's intention. That's a signal. And so our brains are wired to pick up on, if something happens 3 times, we notice. Dad. Yeah. Like that. I mean, it's kind of how we work as human beings. And so I just kind of use that to my advantage, because if I want to establish something for a character, I have it happen 3 times, and that kind of, and then the person sort of subconsciously realizes, oh, this is a character I can like and trust, like that, and you move ahead with that. And then when you kill that character, they're like, no, that's a character I liked and trusted.
Yeah, I just started liking him.
I know, and it's like, yeah, I know, I really set you up to do that. I'm sorry.
I set you up for that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Oh. But another question I got from the fans was, will we see the Jade Court at any point?
We might see an agent of theirs towards the end of the series. They're very isolationist, though. I mean, they basically don't leave the Yangtze River Valley. They've got their world. They're perfectly happy with it. They want to keep it there, and so they don't usually get too terribly adventurous. I mean, if I'm going to have monsters from China, historically speaking, China's been very, very good at being China, at being immovable and not going anywhere. They've been terrible at expanding their empire, if only because, geographically, they sort of seem to have expanded to the limits of the Himalayas, and so as monsters who are sort of, okay, these are Chinese dedicated monsters, they are all about China. The Jade Court is all about Chinese tradition and Chinese society, and that's kind of what they do. They sort of see themselves as the deities of this area and the long-term thinkers of this area, and so and it's been very inspired because the Chinese themselves, they tend to think in very long terms. They have plans of 20, 30, 50, 100 years. They don't have 5-year plans.
Yeah.
5-year plans that's practically, if your 5-year plan wasn't done 20 years ago, what are you even doing? That's kind of the way that they operate as a nation in terms of history. So I wanted to design monsters that were going to be compatible with that. So that was what I did with the Jade Court. I should get to have them. I should get to have one show up just because everybody's so curious.
Yeah. Like anytime, if you're on the forums, at least, every so often it'll pop up. It'll be like, any Jade Court. Now, I guess that you started kind of answering. Are the Jade Court a different species, or are they White Court just in there and they call themselves Jade?
They're a whole different species.
Oh, see, that's even more interesting to me now. Yeah, I like that. And I know what you've tried to do, and that with your folklore and your mythologies and stuff. And you've said this, and I kind of say this too when anybody talks to me. It's like, I don't change up the characters too much, because if it's a story that's been good for 3,000 years, it's been good for and continued to be told for 3,000 years, it must be good on its own, right? So I just kind of, is that the way you feel?
if you are going to invoke the characters of history and the power and the weight that comes with these stories that have been going for so long, you got to respect them. Because if you don't, there's going to be consequences. There's going to be consequences from the readers. You know, I mean, if you have Thor show, you can have Thor show up as a little skinny nerd with glasses if you want to, but you're not going to have, it's not going to have the same kind of impact as the Thor of myth and legend that you bring in. Which is why I just can't get behind Stormbreaker. That, I mean, all the, for all the, it's bigger, it's better in every way. It has extra superpowers. And I said to myself, and yet it still isn't as significant as Mjolnir is.
Yes.
Because Mjolnir's been there for a lot longer. I mean, Mjolnir's been here for 1,500 years at least. And so, yeah, I mean, it's when I reach back for the historical myth monsters, I want to keep those as close as I can to what they've always been. I might put one little detail in or something like that, like one little, maker's, one little thumbprint on them to make them something more like mine, but I don't try and change them very much at all.
Well, I guess this kind of goes along with side characters. Like, some people think that Michael himself is the best character in the Dresden Files. And like, I always, whenever we would do, because I did a live for like over a year, like every 2 months we do on 2 of your books and 2 or 3 of the books, and people just love Michael. Like, he's a national treasure. Like, we call him a national treasure. I mean,
right.
I've never seen, like, I've seen other people do reviews on like Skin Game and on some of these other ones with Michael, and things happen to him and they're like literally crying when bad things happen.
Right.
And it's like, he's such an impactful character, and I've heard you say in the past, like, he really wouldn't work by himself, but he has so much impact when he comes into other people's stories.
Yeah, I think that's the case with a lot of characters like that. If I was writing stories about Michael, they would be very black and white stories and very predictable, because you know what Michael's going to do in any given situation. I mean, you understand.
And Harry says it over and over again whenever they're going into a building. He's like, Michael, I know who you are, but let's not destroy everything right now. Like, let's make it through here alive.
Yeah. So I don't think he would be. I don't think he would work well as a main character, but as that supporting character, I think really what makes Michael awesome is that people go, man, I wish I had one of those around in my life.
Yeah.
I wish I had somebody like that I could rely on that well, who would call me out when I was out of line, but do it kindly and lovingly and wisely, who's actually good at that. But yeah, Michael is my paladin. He's what I imagine a real paladin to be, somebody who, doesn't just mouth the words of what he believes, but who'll put his life on the line for it.
Like you said, everybody wishes they had somebody like that, that would come running and put themselves in your way, in the way of whatever's coming towards you. Yeah. I think that's why people love Michael so much.
Yeah. He's Captain America. That's Captain America's. I mean, all the Avengers have like actual they have their superpowers, and then they have like their story superpowers. They're the ones that writers work with. So like Tony's superpower is, I have a toy for that. Black Panther's superpower is, my toy's just a little bit cooler than Tony's. And then Cap's superpower is, I've got your back. That's his superpower. Yeah. So whenever somebody's about to die, the shield's about to come in and save them. And that's who I wanted Michael to be.
That is excellent. That's so good. Now I remember hearing that the rights to the Dresden Files were with Fox for a while, and then they got bought out by Disney. Are you allowed to tell us where they're at in the process? Are they yours? Are they still with Disney? Or
I'm the creator. I can get away with almost anything.
I can do whatever I want.
Yeah. Right now I'm in talks. I got the rights back after it was with ABC.
Okay.
They were talking about a series, but there was all kinds of conflicts with some other things that they were doing. So it's like, okay, well, you can do the Dresden Files, but you can't do vampires because we're doing a vampires thing. We don't want them to overlap. Okay, we won't do vampire season 1. Okay, you can't do werewolf season 1 because it's like, okay, well, so it's going to be fairies and wizards. We have questions about fairies. Like, oh, okay.
Oh my gosh.
But it
You guys don't know.
Yeah, it wound up being something that we just kind of went like, okay, this is too much. I mean, we got as far as another pilot script and so on. It wasn't. I don't think it was going the way that any of us wanted it to. So eventually, when Disney took over, there was a giant shift in management, and the exec who was in charge of developing the project wound up moving somewhere else, and so it got dropped. And so at the moment, the rights are in my hands. I'm working with some people. We're trying to set up something else for a streaming thing. I really like the direction this one's going. We'll see if it works out.
No, okay, all right. So
I mean, one of those things where so many things have to line up in order to make it happen in Hollywood that, you know, even with the best of intentions and everybody going, yeah, we're absolutely going to do this. Maybe they do, maybe they don't.
okay, and so this is some new news, a little bit of breaking, so that's awesome. You know, one of the questions that everybody seems to be asking, especially after, I mean, some will call it a debacle with the Witcher. How integral are you going to be, and how much involvement and how tight are you going to be holding on? Because, and again, I don't want to badmouth like television writers, because some of them are amazing, some of them, it's just like anything else.
Right.
But you know, the words that, you know, we kind of heard kind of coming from Henry Cavill, that, you know, the writers on the show weren't fans of the source material and stuff. Like, where are you at with that? Like, is that going to be something that you're like, I'm not going to let them, you know?
There ain't going to be a show unless I'm in charge of the writers' room.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how much extra work that's going to be. It's going to be a lot, but yeah, what I've said was, hey, you know, I'm going to be the writing room editor. I mean, I'll be happy to work with writers. I'll be happy to say, hey, you know, this is a weak spot in your writing. Let's work on that. And here's how, you know, here's what you've got. And all we have to do is twist it this much, and look how much, and it will improve it tremendously. I mean, I'll be happy to work with writers, maybe who don't have as much experience. But I mean, at this point, with the way that things are contracting in Hollywood right now, I think you're just going to see a lot more experienced writers working.
That would be amazing.
There's just because we started making, you know, 20 times as many shows as we used to, but we didn't have 20 times as many writers. So people have been signing on, and I think there's been that kind of expansion is just that kind of expansion of the industry is just requiring time for people to gain experience. You know, for people to learn. Oh, I need to. This is how I can make it better. This is how I can do it better. But I think with the contraction, we're going to see an improvement in the quality of writing, just in general, which is something that needs to happen. You know.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that, because like that's one of the things that just kind of gets on as a writer myself. I mean, I'm nowhere near you know, the level to get adaptations and stuff, but it's like I almost feel like some of the TV writers that we've been hearing over the last couple of years, like, well, if you were as good as Jim Butcher, or if you were as good as Andrzej Sapkowski, you would have written a worldwide bestseller. You know, like, don't try to do your own thing here. Make their thing work.
Yeah.
You know,
when you're working with somebody else's property that they made, and I've done that exactly once with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But when you're yeah, there you go. But when you're working with somebody else's property, I mean, again, you're borrowing from the power and impact of stories that somebody else created. You know, and if you could do stories that awesome, you'd have made them yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, you need to respect what's come before you, so that you can give that same you can give that same feeling and that you know those same experiences to the audience that original story brought along.
Yeah, and I know you talked about you would be all for an animated series.
Oh, I absolutely would. Because that one I could do things like, no, his nose is wrong, fix it. You know, I mean, I could totally work out my control issues on that kind of stuff.
Well, and then you could just have James do all the voices.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh,
I definitely have him do Dresden if we did an animated series. I would definitely do
oh,
that.
have to. And Bob.
One we're talking about right now is a live series, and I'm just trying to figure out where else he could be that he would be awesome in.
Oh, see, now I have watched some animation that I like, but I'm just like, if we're gonna do Dresden, we gotta go live action. Like, is that how you feel too? Like, you would be okay with an animated, but you like, is that where you want it?
In my head, when I'm writing it, it's an anime.
Oh, okay.
It's an anime. It looks along the same style of Lodos War. If anybody's watched Tales of the Lodos War, it's sort of like that in my head. But doing live action, I mean, it'd be a lot of fun. I want to do it. I want to show up and have like a recurring part. Like I want to be like
Stan Lee.
Yeah. Well, I want to be like the crime scene technician who just goes by and blinks because it's Dresden again. It goes on by. That kind of role. That's the kind of role I want. But it would be a lot of fun. I mean, even the first series was so cool. Going up to visit the set. And to meet all these different crewmen and so on. So many people on the crew were fans. They were coming up and getting autographs and everything. The woman who played Murphy had read all the books, and she was like, "Can I get an autograph too?" Like, okay, so that was cool. And getting to see him do the various stunts and so on. We were up there, and stuntmen were getting ready for something where somebody was going to get hauled on a wire through into a wall, and so they were putting on the armor and all that stuff. And they called my son over and they let him try the armor on. He was about 11. It was a great day.
That is awesome. And yeah, and another thing, I know you were talking about your son. Your son is has becoming like a gym bro or whatnot, and I've noticed over the last 5 years or so, like you're physiquing up. Is that something that did you just do that to get in shape, or was that also a mental thing? Because I know a lot of people like myself, working out always kind of helps the mental too.
No, yeah, that's my therapy. Most days. No, I started working out when I was 37. I started weightlifting, and I've just been doing it ever since. And then lately, people have noticed because I lost a ton of weight over the pandemic. I went down to from 200 to 155.
Wow.
And then went back to the gym and was getting pretty pumped up. I'm doing boxing now.
Oh, okay.
Studying at a place called the Old School Boxing Gym, and it's just kind of like low ceilings, heavy bags hanging everywhere. There's a ring, there's some treadmills and some weightlifting cages, and then just a bunch of guys who want to box. And I go there, and I've been doing that for about a month now. There's a reason people who are 50 plus do not start boxing. So exhausting.
So exhausting.
You're using all these muscles you haven't used for anything else for a long time, and oh my goodness. But I'm also, I'm learning new stuff, and that's cool.
That is.
I've been doing martial arts since I was 15, and somehow I've never gotten around to boxing, which is a martial arts, and people should do it such. But when I work, but there's like a lot of professionals who work out there, and they just come by while you're working out. Hey, keep this hand up. Hey, you got watch your feet. You got to have your feet placed this way, or you won't have any power on the punch and that sort of thing. So that's a lot. That's a ton of fun as well. But yeah, the kid looks like Henry Cavill. I mean, he's over 6 feet tall and huge. He's been lifting since he was about 19, and he's 32 now.
Wow.
So he's built. I mean, I think he's pushing towards 350 on his bench, and
wow.
Yeah. I mean, he is strong. It's my boy,
Yeah, my son's 10 years old, and he's into football stuff. So yeah, you're always like, as your son gets older, you're like, yeah, that's my son. Like,
there he is. I'll have
but now that
over and beat you up, so I don't have to.
Now, so you're not originally from Colorado, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So what brought you out to? Because my best friend actually moved out there a few years ago, and we visit. Actually, we're going out here in a couple of weeks. What drew you to Colorado?
Oh, when I was in college, I used to come up and LARP in Colorado, and it was kind of like the holy land of LARPing.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Run up there, and we would go up. We would run up there for a weekend and just go crazy in the mountains, and then drive home and be all hyped about it the whole time. And then eventually, I moved up here. There was a woman I got involved with, and that didn't work out. But I actually fell in love with the mountains. I fucking love it up here. Pardon my French.
No, you're good.
But yeah, I mean, I had a cabin. I had a cabin up high in the mountains for a long time, up at 9,000 feet. And I had bears and mountain lions and
yeah,
the yard all the time. I had my dog offer to fight a bear for me a couple of times. Where we would just be out and there'd be a bear.
It was like, let me at him, Dad.
Yeah. Now come here. Oh, thank God, I didn't want to fight him. I've got a dog who looks tough, but he's actually a big baby. So
yep, that's our dogs.
Yeah, but yeah, I just fell in love with it up here. It's cool and laid back, and there's lots and lots of different places. I'm close to Colorado Springs now, which is Olympic City. So I mean, if there's any kind of sport you want to learn, Olympic City is the place to learn it.
Yeah,
got people there. Everybody. Half the guys at the gym I work out at are Olympic scouts. So it's all kinds of there's all kinds of stuff to do. I love hiking. I love whitewater rafting. I love going horseback riding in the mountains. And that's all stuff you can do up here. And it's just good for my soul. I mean,
it's beautiful
last year, but it's good for my soul. I went to a river. We went whitewater rafting, and it was just a class 3, so it was no big deal. And I'm experienced enough at it that it was going to be boring. But I was there with my sister and her son. And so, I was taking her out to kind of show her. And the river was only about 37 degrees because the glaciers were huge that year. And I decided I was going to go without a wetsuit just because I wanted to be able to get the cold and practice the cold endurance, So
yeah,
I was all set for that. And so, we'd been going for about an hour, and I'd been getting splashed regularly in water. And the response to that, the way you stay warm is you laugh. Because
yeah,
these muscles here between your ribs, your intercostal muscles, produce heat at about 11 times the rate of other muscles in your body. So when you exhale hard, like when you're laughing, that's when you're using those muscles. And so it starts generating heat and keeping your core temperature high. So I was having a ball laughing. Exposure to the cold. I mean, it also gets you all this, all these endorphins get going.
Endorphins, yeah.
So you really are laughing. It's like I feel like a freaking Viking going down this road. Fun. But at one point we hit a bad patch, and I wasn't paying attention. I went out of the boat into the water, and and without a wetsuit, you've got less than 90 seconds to live.
Yeah.
So
you're like, help!
Get me back in here. I hit the water. I've got 90 seconds to live, and so immediately it was like, okay, how am I going to do this? All right, get my feet out in front of me, look for rocks. Where's the shore? Here's the closest point of shore. I'm going to head over there. The raft was already too far away to save me, so I knew I was on my own. So I just kind of swum out and got out. And afterwards, they were, the manager of the place was like, "Well, I heard what happened. You went in without a suit and you came out." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Do you have any special training?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a writer, so I've done a lot."
I'm a writer.
I'm a writer. I've done a lot of research. He kind of laughed. He says, "No, seriously." I said, "No, seriously. I knew I had about 90 seconds to live. It got me the hell out of the water."
In your will, it's like, erase my browser history. I'm a writer. Please.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, it's too late for that. The NSA already knows all about it.
Oh my God.
You do a bunch of research for effects of an EMP on an American city. People start looking at you.
Yeah, I bet they were a lot of bleeps were going into the CIA when you were writing Battleground.
Probably. Yeah, and perhaps they're fans. I don't know.
They're like, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Ooh, nice. How far ahead do you plan, and how solid are the plans? Okay. Well, one more story. When I went in with the first couple of chapters of Stormfront for the first time and showed it to my teacher. Now, I had not been planning on writing urban fantasy, but she had been suggesting it for a long time, and finally I just said, okay, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna fill out all her little worksheets. I'm gonna do all her little forms. I'm gonna do everything that she tells me to, exactly the way she tells me to, and then she will see what terrible results come from this kind of rigid process. And so I proceeded to do that. and I wrote, Stormfront, which showed her. But when I went in with it, I showed her the first couple of chapters, and she read them, and and bear in mind that her critique had included such things as rolling up my pages, leaning across the desk, popping me on the head with them, and saying, "What were you thinking?" Then explaining what I'd done wrong. She didn't believe in candy coating anything. She wanted to prepare you for New York, and in New York, there's no mercy. You've got a good story or you don't, and that's that. But at the end of it, she reads it and she folds, she straightens the pages, puts them on the desk, and says, "You did it." I said, "What?" She says, "You did it. This is of professional quality. I don't know if this will be the first thing that you sell, but you will be able to sell this. Hang on to it. You did it." I was like, "Oh my God," because I had not expected this reaction. I'd never gotten it before. And I kind of blinked, and she looks at me and says, "Now, next week, come in with an outline for the rest of it." And I said, "Okay."
Gotcha.
And he meant the rest of the novel. The next week, I show up with an outline for a 20-book series with a 3-book trilogy at the end, to finish it all off. And I start babbling about it. I go through every book, the basic outline of every book, and kind of the sketches of the different characters and different interests and everything that's going to happen. And I realized at the end of the consult course, because that's what this is it's a 45-minute consult. And I realized at 40 minutes that she hasn't said a word the entire time. So I kind of finish up, and then I'm going to have a big 3-book trilogy at the end to finish it off. And then I kind of go, "What do you think?"
What do you think?
And I remember the look on her face, and the look on her face just said, "I've finally gotten this kid on board to cooperate with me. I can't just shoot him down.
And now he's been overboard."
Yeah, I can't just tell him he's not going to sell a 20-book series, as his first thing. So she says, "I think if you can sell a 20-book series, by the time you get to that big trilogy at the end, you should be doing okay." and she was very, very, very good at the understatement. And so I was like, "Okay, fine." And then because she didn't tell me, she didn't bother to tell me it was impossible, and I didn't know it was impossible, so I did it. And that's kind of how it's turned out. But in terms of the outline of the series, I outlined every book with a 2-sentence sketch that outlined each book, and a 2-sentence sketch that outlined each of the big ass trilogy at the end. But I've never written a 23-book long series before, so now it's probably going to be more like 25. But that sounds like 5 multiplied by 5. I think that's very wizardly. That'll work out. Let's see. Why didn't you go with the original title, Semi-Auto Magic? My editor didn't like it. So then I wanted to call it Abracadaver, and my editor didn't like that one. So then it went up with Stormfront was the one it wound up with. Is the Pyro Fuego that Harry did in Grave Peril a death curse? No. There's something else happening there that we haven't seen yet, and we won't see. And we won't see until book 22.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Just dropping bombs. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there's all the stuff that is still the stuff that's still set up for books that are coming. And,
yeah, there's still a lot to be had.
And I just keep these secrets, and I walk around exploding, trying not to tell everyone.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so I've had people ask me this, and I'm pretty sure I've seen a similar question come up here. Now again, this is 25 years ago or so, right? So how much has it changed? Not necessarily the outline that you showed your teacher, but like in your mind, has it all stayed pretty close to what you were imagining, or is it just a jumble from what it used to be?
Well, the real problem is the jumble's all in the past, because every book that I write, by the time I write it, and then and then I clean it up, and then I send it to the beta readers, and then they get me their feedback, and I write it again, and sometimes it goes back to the betas again, and then it goes to an editor, and then it goes to a copy editor, and then or a line editor, and then it goes to a copy editor, and then it goes to a proof. And by the time a book is done, I've seen, between 8 and 13 slightly different versions of the same book. So what I have in my head is like this constellation of very slightly different alternate realities stretching.
It could have went a different way.
Yeah, and I can't always remember. Well, at least not immediately. How did I decide to resolve this? How did I do this plot? Let me go back and look in this book. Oh, it's not even in this book. I got to check a different one. Okay, here. Oh, that's what I did. Right. Okay, now I remember. So occasionally I have to go back and reread my own books so that I can remember, what I did. And that's something that I have to do before I start a new one almost every time. And that's getting to be more and more work, people. So I hope you appreciate it.
I hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
This is the biggest question. I wasn't sure I was going to pull this one up, but they always ask me this. I'm like, okay.
Make a move on the island in cold days. She wasn't infected then.
Okay, there you guys go. You guys been asking a long time. Okay, so here, this is just a kind of a Dresden fanboy question I've had. Is in one of the earlier books, Dresden states that he doesn't have, and for a long time, even now, I mean, his control is a lot better than it used to be, but he'll always say, people can outclass me because I'm just like a fire hydrant and they're like a laser beam, some of them, like the top tier guys. But he did state that he thought he was probably in the top 25 in pure raw horsepower.
Right.
Where do you think you're the man, so where is he now with all his upgrades and all his work that he's done?
Well, I mean, Dresden's going to realize what everybody does, and that is that, as you get better and better and better, you realize how good you aren't, and where your weak spots are, and how fragile you are, and you start taking that more and more and more seriously, which actually does have the effect of making you more dangerous because you're more aware of reality and how you fit into it. He's getting to the point where you get to a point where you don't worry about that. You don't worry about who's number one.
Yeah.
You worry about who's still alive.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And that's where, there's, Dresden has always gone through life, with the attitude of there's no such thing as a fair fight.
Yeah.
And then at this point, he's kind of coming around to realize, oh, wait a minute, there's no fights that you win or lose. There's fights you survive and fights you don't. And if you survive it, you won. You're still
yeah. Well, I think that's why it seems like so many of these really powerful entities, Bateron especially has mentioned this, is like they can't believe that a wizard so young has survived. So like they even use that word survived so much.
It's not that he's powerful. It's not that he's had strength. There's lots of young wizards with that. But he's come in as this arrogant punk who was also, very idealistic and got himself involved in a lot of things because of it and didn't die. And it's like, ooh, keep an eye on this one. Yeah, that guy there, watch him. We'll see. Maybe he'll be something one day.
Yeah. Well, that's the gatekeeper, right, from the very beginning. He's like, I'm gonna keep an eye on this kid.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've been watching you. Wait, what?
You have?
Yeah. Looking back at your old work, what's the biggest way you say you've improved since the early days as a writer? I get paid a lot more. That's the biggest thing. Next is the more you work as a writer, the more you realize how powerful simplicity is in art, and how powerful keeping things simple is.
Yeah, that is amazing. I like that.
Out there you want to write for, I would write for Fallout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would write. Yeah, I mean, I've got about 5,000 hours in Fallout 4. So.
Whoa. Yeah, I Fallout 3 and New Vegas. I played so much New Vegas, but
right.
I think that's the best one.
Yeah, here's my computer screen right now. I was playing a bit before we got started.
Okay, all right. How do you play? How do you go?
Oh, heavily modded with tons and tons and tons of ghouls everywhere. I play a zombie apocalypse Fallout 4.
That is awesome. Okay, what more work?
Any plans for more work with the Codex Alera? I love the Dresden Files. Thank you. You're welcome, Alan. I don't have any plans for the Codex Alera right now, but it's always possible I could need to pay off gambling debts or something. I need to go back to that, in which case I could go back to one of a couple of places, because the first one was humans versus Zerg, and I could always go and throw the Protoss in when the Vord's enemy arrives to exterminate them. And the Alerans have to say, well, what about us? Oh, you're definitely going too. So that'll be a nice three-way fight. But the other place I might go back would be I would go back to the first class of new cursors after Emperor Octavian takes over, and then we'd have Aaron there as the trainer for all the cursors, and then Fidelius kind of being Batman and old Batman in the background. And that would be a lot of fun. But I don't know if I'll ever do it, because I've got all these other stories I want to write, and it turns out, I have an expiration date. Look, there's Gray.
No, my wife tells me every day it's starting to come on me too. I'm 36, so
yeah. Let's see. Is Harry not actually speaking ancient Etruscan going to be a problem? Well, I mean, he got it. He kind of got it for free, and there's sort of the vocabulary is still all there in his head, but it's in his head sort of the same way that your Spanish from high school is still in your head. It's like he can sort of operate with it, but it's not going to be easy for him to reach back and do that. And
correspondence courses, man.
Dating the queen of the people who still speak ancient Etruscan. So, name a fantasy author you are reading following. Check out Jennifer Blackstream. She's an independent author who is writing. She writes a mystery series with her character who is a witch who goes out and solves problems in her area. In her area, and it's very kind of procedurally focused, and very much a mystery series. I'm enjoying that. If you haven't read Lois Bujold, What Are You Even Doing? Go read Lois Bujold. Start with Shards of Honor, and let me think who else. I've been reading this kid named James J. Butcher, and he really seems to know his stuff. But seriously, the kid is going to be he's going to leave me eating his dust in another 10 or 15 years. I mean, he's really good. He's really good.
So did you when did your son show like an interest where he's like, Dad, I would really like to get into this?
Oh, when he went off to college, he wanted to be a writer, and he decided to go to KU. They have a good science fiction program there, and and I pulled him to one side and I said, son, if you ever really want to learn stuff about writing, let me know and we can work together. And I'll teach you. And he goes, Dad, I think this is something we should leave to the professionals. Okay. You know what? He knew what he wanted. He was off to do it. It's like, okay, let him do it. And so he comes to me a few years later and he says, Dad, I wonder if that offer was for teach and write was still open. I said, of course. I said, what changed your mind? He says, well, it's just some of the teachers that I've worked with. I think if they could do what you do, they would do what you do because they seem doing what they do. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, okay, well, then let's get started. And so he started working for me as my personal trainer. And so we would get together, we'd weight lift, talk about writing, go take the dog for a walk, talk about writing, go sit down and eat, talk about writing while we were eating, and then we would watch TV. And we started with Babylon 5 and Buffy, and it said, okay, let's talk about the writing of these shows and what they do so well that made them so effective and so well loved. And so we just did that for years. We still do that. We get together and we take the dog for a walk, and then we sit down and right now we're watching Avatar: The Last Airbender on Netflix and the new season of Invincible.
That is so because I can see it both ways where he's like, kind of under your shadow and then just be like, well, I want to kind of go do my own thing. But then he realizes, well, you have a shadow for a reason, because you are that good, and so why not lean on that if you have that available?
Yeah, he's got a big shadow to step out from, but I think he'll do it handily.
That is.
Speaking of which, I'm going to have to meet up with him in just a few moments here. So.
Okay, yeah, we'll kind of start wrapping it up here. But if you, we'll get this question and then maybe one more question.
All right. About Mouse, what does he mean when he says, "I live with the wizard, I cheat"? Is that to do with his temple dog stuff, or does he get power from Harry? It's more the education he's gotten from Harry. He's learned that that Dresden, when he sets out to protect and defend, he doesn't have any rules about protecting and defending. Really, he's going to do whatever needs to be done. To do what it takes to help people who need his help. And Mouse has kind of gone the same way. He's Harry's child in a lot of ways. So he's learned from his dad, and that's really more what he's talking about.
That is great. Well, if to leave people on, a note, advice that you would give to writers or just somebody in general. I mean, you've already said so many great things to kind of live by, but if you were going to leave people on a note, what would you leave them on?
The most important thing you can do is write something that speaks to you, that makes you laugh, that makes you cry, that makes you want to stand up and cheer. That's the kind of thing. That's what you do to get readers to love you. Is you got to get them, to love the people you want them to love, to hate the people you want to hate. Write the people that you just can't stand and make them your villain. Do that. And make sure it's the people that are your personal villains too. I can't tell you how many times I've written the kids who used to beat me up after school. They have different faces, but they're in my books all the time. And do that stuff, the stuff that makes you tear up, the stuff that makes you go, oh my God, I have to stop for a moment and compose myself. That is the stuff that you can, and the whole art of writing is learning how to take the feelings and the thoughts that are here and to give them to somebody else. And start with good material. Start with the stuff that matters to you.
That's excellent advice. I say the same thing is and this is why your books are so good, is because we can tell that you love what you're writing. If people are just writing because something's popular, but they don't really love it, you can feel that too.
That's true. Yeah. It's not just books. I mean, it's music, it's plays, it's television, it's movies. If people are having a good time, you can tell. There are shows that were really just not that good, but the people watching them were having a blast, and you went along with them for the ride. And that's a big deal. That's not nothing. Yeah. Do the stuff that matters to you. Do the stuff you love.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. We are all looking forward to 12 months. More Cinder Spires, please. You are now not only the king of urban fantasy, but you have taken over steampunk. And, we can't wait to see what the next thing holds. And thank you for dropping a few, adaptation bombs on us here about where we're at in that process, because
we'll see. I'm hopeful.
We are all waited with bated breath, and we're looking forward to the next step in the Dresden Files.
All right. Thank you very much, man. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, and we will see you soon.
All right. Take care.